It is about time we had a good old-fashioned kit restoration. This is a Rogers holiday from roughly this era of time. This kit really isn't in the worst shape by any means. It's kind of just grungy and nasty. The insides are pretty disgusting. There's this nice sticker on the floor tom that we gotta remove. Kind of hard to see, but there's some nastiness on the wrap that we gotta get rid of, and that's on really all of the drums. The chrome is extra grungy, got some nice tape residue on there. The floor tom legs need some new shoes. Got some fresh heads as well as a bass drum hoop because that was missing. And then inside of this box, we got some more goodies, some tension rods, bass drum claws, bass drum tension rods, and some other random tension rods, plus this this Frankenstein tom mount thing. So the first thing we gotta do is tear this kit apart. Now, taking a kit completely apart does kind of suck and take some time, but there's a few main reasons why I'm doing it this way. That's pretty nasty. Let's go ahead and get rid of this. The first reason is it'll be easier to clean all the different parts and you'll also get a much better result. You can batch out and clean all the separate parts separately. Imagine that. The way I'm going to clean the shells is going to be different than the way I clean the hardware, and the way I clean the hardware is going to be different than the way I clean the screws, and so on and so on. Then the second reason is you get to know the drum set better. That's how the shell should look. Look how clean that is. You'll see how stuff is put together, you can look inside of the lugs and see how they work, and sometimes things will look good, but once you put your hands on them, you'll quickly learn that they're actually messed up and need fixing. Goodbye 60-year-old dust. So on top of making cleaning easier, I'm really giving every lug, tension rod, nut, bolt, and screw a quick once-over to make sure that everything is still in good shape. And a quick pro tip whenever disassembling drums, keep everything organized. These are trays I found on Amazon, I'll link them down below, but I found that these kind of fit the shape and size of most drum hardware pretty well. Obviously they're not made for drum hardware, so really you can use anything just like these. The kit is all apart, everything is nice and organized. We got all the hoops, got all the hardware, and then of course all the shells. And this is actually a really simple kit to take apart. These are the only tools you need along with a drum key. But now we gotta dive into the shells because you can really see now how this wrap is supposed to look. So first step, we want to get all the surface debris off, so all this dust. Got this nice cobweb right there. Now I'm typically just a soapy water kind of guy, but I found this in my bathroom. I haven't really ever used it, but it says it removes dirt and it freshens surfaces, so we'll give this a shot. I'll link it down below too. Now there's a few of these weird gray spots, so let me bust out the secret tool. A plastic razor blade. This thing is more handy than you can imagine. I can live with that. Now I could take off these badges, but they're just nailed in and the nails bend over on the inside to lock it in. So I really don't want to mess with those because they'll probably break. So I'll just use a Q-tip. Bonus tip, cut your Q-tip at an angle. Now you have a little precision scraper. That looks 1,000 times better, and for comparison, here's before. Look at that, scrapes right off. And now for the moment we've all been waiting for, the sticker. So the good news is this appears to be just a paper sticker, which means it should come off easier, but also if we kind of scratch it up and then soak it, it should loosen up a lot faster. Also, if anyone knows what Paragon is or what this sticker is, then drop a comment. I'm gonna try some Pledge now. Probably not the best, but it's something different, and it was in the studio, so let's give it a shot. I think that actually did something. I will call that acceptable. The power of lemons. At this point, it would make sense to clean the insides of the shells, but I really don't feel like doing that right now. So instead, I'm gonna get a quick and easy win and clean the bass drum spurs and the floor tom legs, mainly because I want to try this stuff out. So I bought this stuff, or this tough stuff, because I bought an old Blazer that had been sitting for 20 years and the back window was busted out, so the interior wasn't exactly the cleanest. So everyone seemed to recommend this for old, nasty, moldy, and disgusting interiors, but I was reading it and it says it's good for chrome. And if this works as well as it does on fabric and upholstery, then I think this gunk is just going to melt off with this. Well, I had pretty high hopes, but these are still kind of gunky and nasty looking, so I think we gotta go with the old school method of aluminum foil and some elbow grease. This one is the tough stuff. You can still see all the crud on there. And this one is the aluminum foil, some soapy water, and elbow grease. I haven't gave up on this yet though, because it says painted wood, so maybe I'll try this on the insides of the shells later. If you're new here, the best way I've found to clean chrome is with aluminum foil and soapy water. Aluminum is softer than chrome, so it leaves no scratches, and the soapy water kind of breaks up stuff and helps lubricate the foil. This works on rims, lugs, hardware like cymbal stands, or even the bumper on your Blazer that's been sitting for 20 years. I should probably mention now that this isn't my kit actually. This belongs to my buddy John. He's the one I got the Kent drum set from, the Fiberstar drum set from, and also I cut down a bass drum for him in an old video. But I say all that because this kit was missing the bottom hoops when he got it, so we put some new ones on it, so half of them are new, so I'm only cleaning the ones that are dirty. Here's a before and after of the cleaning, and here's one of the new hoops for comparison. I would say that's pretty good. Also, before I forget, looky here. These are definitely not the type of feet that came on this kit, but I think they'll do. Better than nothing. Might as well hit the bass drum while I'm at it. This will just be soapy water without the aluminum foil. Yum. So this part of the inlay is loose, and originally they just used these little tiny nails or tacks to hold everything down, but I don't trust those, so I'm gonna use some tape. This is speed tape made by FastCap. I'll link it down below. This tape is made for like cabinet veneers and like edge banding and that kind of stuff, but I found that this is probably the best stuff, the thinnest stuff, and the most sticky stuff when it comes to drum wraps that have come undone or inlays like this. It also works a lot better than like the double-sided carpet tape, which a lot of people like to use for wraps, so I would definitely recommend this stuff. There is a gap in the seam. I could hide that with a bass drum claw or just put it on the bottom where no one will ever see it. Inside of this Tupperware, I have all the screws and washers for the lugs. And to clean them, I'm gonna use the CLR. I've used this in the past. It is pretty strong, so I'll just make sure not to soak it too long. And while that marinates, let's take a look at the lugs. I think for these, I'm gonna try the tough stuff again. Alright, it's been about 5 or 10 minutes. It's kind of hard to see, but the liquid is much darker now, so maybe this worked. At first glance, that worked out pretty well. There was one lug that was really disgusting in this area, so let me see if I can find it. There's a bit of crud right there. We'll set that one over here. There's also some crud right there, but it's wiping right off. That did a really good job of loosening and dissolving all the crud on these lugs, so definitely going to use that on the others. Now for the screws and washers. I wouldn't say I'm the most happy with those results, but considering they looked like this before, I'll take it. Now, another really important step after doing anything like this is you want to protect it from flash rusting. I don't even think this stuff exists anymore, but basically it's just like a spray wax in a can for like your car. You can really use anything, but I do prefer the wax products because they're less oily, and I'll just let this sit for a minute and then wipe off the excess and it won't be all oily and disgusting. They're clean, protected, and ready to hold some lugs down for eons to come. Now we just gotta do the rest of the hardware. I'm marking this lug to do a little experiment, so remember how this lug looks now. Well, so much for that test. I guess it dissolved Sharpie. Ah, the Sharpie did survive. Look at that. Looks brand new. That really wasn't that bad. Typically cleaning the hardware is the most annoying and takes the longest time, but if you use the right stuff, it makes the job a lot easier and a lot faster. I used the CLR on the parts that looked like they were calcified, at least I think they were calcified. See how that's white and dry and scratchy looking? Basically all of the hardware looked like that, and the best way to get rid of that is chemically. And as far as the tough stuff goes, this worked incredibly well. There were a few lugs and pieces of hardware that I did have to scrub, but this really loosened up the dirt and gunk. And I think the reason this didn't really work originally was these pieces were actually kind of greasy and the dirt was attached to the grease, while all the other parts were just naturally dirty and not greasy and dirty because this isn't a degreaser. So tough stuff for the win. I'll link it down below. Now let's use it on the insides of the shells. See all those speckles? Pretty sure that's mold. And it's melting right off. I really didn't want the stickers to get wet and risk ruining them, so at first I just completely avoided them. So pro tip, to get up close I used a magic eraser to mask off that area because they're soft and conform to the shape of the shell. Now that was just a light scrub, but you can really see how much dirt and crud are on these shells. Pretty nasty. Now, the sucky part is that all of this tape residue is just straight up petrified onto the shell. I tried everything I could, but no matter what, it just wouldn't come off. Now, I easily could get it off, but the only issue is it would take the paint off too. If this was my kit, I would just scrape and sand all the residue off and then repaint all the insides, but I asked John and he says that he doesn't really care about the insides and he doesn't want to spend the extra time or money to repaint them. So now I can focus my attention on the outside and buff up the wrap and hopefully make it look nice and shiny. I'll be using this Novus plastic polish. This is probably the most popular stuff for wraps as well as acrylic shells. And just as a reminder, this is how the wrap currently looks, and we want it to look like this. Now, once again, I bought this cheap little buffer for my truck, and that came out halfway decent. That was the first time I've ever buffed anything, and this is the first time I've used this type of buffer on a drum, so let's see what happens. This is a 3-step process, and now it's just the first step. Also, I should mention this is the hardest pad that I have. It definitely brought back the shine, but I don't think we're gonna get the original color back. You never really know if you can bring a wrap back to life until you start buffing it or wet sanding it, which I'll talk more about in a second. But typically solid wraps like these are ones that you can bring back to life since the yellowing is on the outside or on the surface of the wrap. Glitter wraps or sparkle wraps typically have layers to them because of the stuff inside of them, and in the case of this wrap, the yellowing is actually on one of the inside layers, which means it's basically impossible to bring the original color back. And the way I was able to confirm that is by wet sanding a spot on the shell. Now, can you tell where I wet sanded on the shell? Probably not. So if the issue was on the surface of the wrap, we would have seen a spot that looked like this after sanding it, because this sandpaper is a lot more coarse than this compound. And also, just for comparison, check this out. So all this buffing isn't for nothing. The color may still be wrong technically, but at least the shine and gloss is being brought back. I was really hoping for a nice satisfying before and after, but you can't win them all. That also means that there isn't much I can do about the spot on the floor time where the wrap is missing. I do have a bunch of these scraps, but that probably wouldn't look the best. The good news is that the wood has also darkened up over the years and does kind of already match the tone of the wrap. Kind of. Obviously it's still noticeable, but it could be worse. We currently just went back in time. The 12 inch is buffed and the 16 isn't yet. You can see that the 12 inch is brighter, but also, I don't know how well you can tell on camera, but it also has a lot more depth in the wrap, while the 16 is more flat. And when I say flat, I don't mean the sheen of the shell, I'm talking about the illusion of depth that the sparkles give the wrap. Got a slight issue on the floor time. I noticed that this part of the wrap was a little bit loose, and as soon as I touched it, it just cracked along this hole right here. So now it's even more loose. So I'm gonna sneak in another piece of this speed tape, get it down like so. So now it's attached to this part of the shell. I'll cut off all the excess. And now the fun part, we can peel off the backing layer, I guess you call it. Now before I push it on, I'm gonna make sure the crack is aligned and then work it down. And then just to be safe, I'm gonna throw a couple clamps on here just so that it fully bonds and cures. That's right, this tape cures. And while that's doing its thing, there's a few more things I gotta fix. First is the floor tom, which, oh hey, it's back together. This screw on the leg mount is wrong. Somehow it still screws in, even though it's the wrong thread pitch. But the main thing is it's too long and it bottoms out and doesn't get tight enough. So somewhere in here, or yeah, in here, we might have something that'll work. Looks good to me. Floor tom, officially done. Rack tom, officially done. Snare drum, almost done. We just need some wires. Don't forget to cut the ribbon at an angle for extra style points. Snare drum is done. So that leaves just the bass drum. First thing I want to do is get a coat of paint on the old hoop. So just to make things clear, John bought the other hoop and had it painted black, and it would have made sense to do both at the same time, but that didn't happen. I also mentioned that I could put an inlay on the new hoop to match the old hoop, but he really didn't care. If this was my kit, I would have routed a slot and put it in, even though you saw earlier that the wrap didn't really match perfectly. So it is what it is, and while that's drying, there's even more to fix for the bass drum. Technically, this is part of the bass drum. These three fit, they're a little bit long, so I could cut them down, but then I found these two, which I have no idea what these are off of, but they fit perfectly. Almost like they were made for this. And the last thing I gotta fix are these bent tension rods. That's pretty bad. Those came out pretty straight. These were already straight. And then these four, I'm not even gonna bother. These were the worst of them all. And those are getting replaced with regular tension rods, and I'll put these at the bottom so that way the T-handle doesn't interfere with the floor, and also it doesn't interfere with the pedal. The bass drum is almost done. There's one more thing we got to do, but I did want to point out this piece is missing. This would be for like a cymbal arm that comes off of the bass drum. I do have a bunch of random Rogers parts, but they're all from the wrong era. And also that not all of the claws are original. I was able to do 6 on the Rezo side, so just the bottom 2 don't match, but you'll never see those. And then the top 4 on the batter side are correct, and the bottom 4 are not. So this one is proper, and this one is wrong. They're really not that different. If you look up close, obviously you can tell, but really I just did my best to hide the ones that weren't correct.